Welcome back to the Poor Proles Almanac. This is Andy, and today we are following up last week's episode on the fundamentals of compost to dig deeper into the bigger framework of compost with the folks over at the Denver Compost Collective. The Denver Compost Collective provides a weekly compost collection service for apartment dwellers in the city of Denver, but it's about much more than saving organic matter from the landfills. The collective is framed in building community and working towards healthy, local food systems. The community farm partners regularly receive compost directly from the Denver Compost Collective, supporting the farm's efforts to grow local, healthy, natural foods right in their communities. This model is unique and one that can be replicated in many cities across the country, and that's what this conversation is about. How do we take something as simple as compost to build community? And much like the fungi that feed the plants, how can compost help us build roots that help prepare us for a future that will require us to be more resilient? Take a listen to this episode. I'm sure you'll be inspired. And if you'd like to get involved with the Denver Compost Collective, their information is in the show notes. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us. This will be a fun interview because I'm joined by the whole team over at the Denver Compost Collective. Did I say that right? Was Denver Compost Collective correct? It is.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, I was like, is it cooperative or collective? But it is collective.
It's cooperative. Give us time.
So I'm joined by a number of folks. I'll let them introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Sean.
Sure. I'm Sean. I'm the worker owner currently. The goal for our organization is to become a worker cooperative, but it just takes time and lots of things coming together, right? So, and takes people choosing it in their own ways in the meantime. So it's been around for a little over 5 years here in Denver, and we get paid to pick up people's food waste from apartment dwellers specifically. So it's small scale pickups and small volume compost production that we do. And then we partner with community farms that are doing the right things in our area, and then we give it to them for free. So we just try to make that our main goal, but it sits in the background. Our main goal is to take care of the farm partner, but we get paid to pick up food waste.
Cool.
Hello, my name is Kira. I am basically a worker with Sean doing compost as well as marketing and sales.
My name is Daniel. I'm pretty much here for the dirty work, food collection, compost making, smelling like rotting food all day. I can't say it's a bad thing, honestly. I do enjoy it. See, I'm down to be part of that and kind of be part of the thing that our work is going towards. That's definitely been a thing for me is, food security, self-reliance, things along those lines.
Awesome.
Hi there. My name is Jimmy, and I drive the box truck around Denver to pick up the compost pails from all the people who are participating in the program. Yeah, we do that 3 days a week, and we pick up, hundreds of pails every day that we're out there. And, we work with lots of apartment complexes and households, and with a lot of pails at the end of the day. So that's at this point, that's my role with the company. And I didn't think that I was gonna sign up to be a truck driver, but that's kind of just how it ended up.
Because here you are. You're the guy that everyone waves to now.
Right? Yeah.
Driving down the road.
Yeah.
And you've got a farm as well, right?
Yes, I do. There's probably about maybe between an eighth and a quarter of an acre in full cultivation. I grow vegetables as well as medicinal herbs that you'd find in like teas and tinctures and stuff like that. And it's an urban farm located in Denver. And
tell them the name, man.
It's called the Counter Beat Farm and Folk School. It's just, been farming for over a decade now, or, farming and gardening. But, this is the first project that I've taken on that I am just taking responsibility for and stewarding. And it's a bit of a process, but making a lot of progress. Yeah, Sean, we have composted over here about two different iterations, one for about 4 months and then one for about 6 months. And so have definitely done the jobs of making the compost piles, as well as the whole kind of scope of farming. So it's so I don't have a lot of friends and I don't have a lot of time. But that's kind of how it goes,
Awesome. So Sean, how did this all start? Like what made you say, you know what, I need to start collecting people's old banana peels?
To be perfectly honest, it was a pretty vulnerable moment. I was living in my car, and there's this cool cafe that you can go to on Colfax in Denver that you can pay what you can afford, but it's organic food grown locally, primarily vegetarian. But yeah, I just had a hard time affording a meal at the time. And I went into this place, and it meant a lot to eat that food. And I couldn't help myself but I made a promise to the food that I'd do right by it. That got me composting just on an individual level. And then after that, I just realized other people feel moved by closing the loop and being a part of the system that feeds them.
From what I remember, Sean also did a student organization on our local campus about a decade or so ago. And just to kind of, give listeners a sense of like his dedication. I remember I saw him in this hallway of this building one time, and I was talking to him, but he was staring at the apple core in my hand. And he just had his eye on it. It's like, hey, can I take that? And I was like, Jesus Christ, dude, sure. Okay. Really taking this seriously. And, that's, it's been, 10, 12 years since, things have been, this world of composting has been a thing. And, it evolved from, just ideas to, just kind of this principles and aspirations to student groups, and then, business and, working with different gardens, building gardens. And then, eventually it transformed into this Denver Compost Collective.
You said you guys collect hundreds of buckets. I'm curious if you guys have an idea of what you guys are harvesting about a year in terms of compost.
Yeah, Jimmy tested me on this question just last night. He's like, "You better have an answer." So I do have an answer, and it's one that I'm happy to share with your listening audience, but I've not shared it with any other audience because I don't really. We're happy to support anybody who's thinking in radical terms, anybody who's thinking in system change, in liberation terms. We can tell them anything they want to know about what we're doing from the inside out. In fact, they can come see us. But yeah, I don't really care to take care of who's trying to compete and kind of cut corners and type of thing. So anyway, having said that, our volumes are really light. We don't do much in volume when you think about what it means to be a composter. They're talking in thousands of tons at the low level. So we're nowhere near that. And that is actually intentional because the goal of the company is to partner with small scale food producers. And we are forced by the regulations in Colorado to keep things at a certain scale at any one site. So what it does ideally is it forces us to have a real working relationship with our farm partner. And that's also just lucky that our city is going to actually be providing free composting to households. And that could have taken us out as a small operator, but since we're so niche, we only serve apartment dwellers, and that's just kind of a conundrum for these big operators and their big trucks. We're able to keep it moving. So anyway, to answer your question more specifically, right now we're producing finished compost in the just about 125 cubic yards a year. And that's from a membership of right now we're at 650 and growing pretty quickly. So it means as we grow, we're forced to tune into our ecosystem and develop other farm partnerships for where it all ends up.
Yeah.
Yep. So
the definition of community, like if any member that joins this, that is a part of this organization, given their food waste, they're a part of something that is based in passion, based in love, like building partnerships and putting their food waste back into the ground so that they can feed their families with something that is built from like a positive energy on an energetic level and a spiritual level. It's so impactful and it tastes damn good.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you say only that scale, but having worked in landscaping, like moving 100 yards, 100 plus yards of anything, it's a lot when you start thinking about like food and like how quickly, like if you make compost, you throw a bunch of stuff in a pile and it just shrinks. That's a lot of food waste you're going through, and that's awesome that you're putting it to use. So I think personally, as somebody that composts and utilizes a couple different methods, it becomes really interesting because you need other materials, not just food. And you also have to limit things like meat products and things like that, depending on how you're composting. So I'm curious about that kind of more logistical component. How do you guys decide how you're doing things, and do you have to incorporate those browns, or do you rely on other people? Do the farmers have to do that?
Somebody want to take?
Okay. The browns, the leaves. So the method is, do you want to method? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Tell them.
So the mix is 2-in-1. So you're getting your browns, and I'm a chemist. I'm like word to this guy. I'm like, okay, so nitrogen, you're getting your nitrogen, you're putting it with the so it's 2-in-1. Browns, which is your leaves and everything, then mulch, and then 2 buckets of compost.
Yeah. So are you guys providing that, or is the farmer handling all of that? You're just bringing them the food?
Yeah. So with the leaves, you all can better explain this better than I can. But and if I miss anything, let me know.
That's all right.
Basically, during fall, leaves are collected around their neighborhoods in big bags and saved for this purpose throughout the year, to incorporate that within. So it's basically a community effort to get the leaves together and get us basically squared away for.
Realistically, that's pretty simple compared to like trying to come up with leaves every week, or
Yeah.
brown material every week, carbon, and well, we don't have enough. What do we do? Now, do you guys have any problems in terms of like people putting things in compost that they shouldn't be, or because of the scale that kind of regulates itself?
I think as people are getting more familiar with this process and the intricacies of the proper things to compost, they're getting better. But I mean, I'll still find whole roasted chickens, just bones, nothing crazy, but people will tissues they blew their nose with. There's still, I think people have I think this opportunity too is going to allow people to kind of understand again what actually makes the world, what makes our food, what makes the soil. Because yeah, like I said, people will just, I'll get pieces of plastic all the time, things that just have no business in, I'd still call it food prep in my mind. I mean, composting, trying to make sure that all your microbes are balanced, trying not to cause pathogens. I think those things it's not just throw your food away and it turns into compost. It's definitely, and I think people are getting better with it. And I think us as the intermediates on that, as the, kind of segue for people, is to educate them better on what to compost. Cause like I said, people will give me, I don't know, just whatever they don't even want. They think it's somehow putting in a compost bin cancels it out as being garbage, but it's still, it's
yeah, I get that.
Seeing what people throw away.
Yeah, there's a term in the industry called wish cycling, or it's similar words like it, and it's something that every recycler or composter has to battle, because you want to feel good about sending off that. If you look at the average recycling bin, it's like half trash, right? Even in a city like Denver that's supposedly informed, it's pretty atrocious. Our program solves that, but we still have catches, like ways that we can kind of stop gaps that we can pull it out of the process before it makes it to the soil. But the first and foremost way that we do that is by small containers, by people who are pretty well informed and knowing basically that they're paying money for a service. Do you really want to pay money for a service if you put a whole chicken in a bucket and we just had to get rid of that, like in a literal landfill? Like people discipline themselves pretty well, and then we catch them.
Yeah.
And then we can follow up with that person who had that pail. So when it's an individual pail, it's just totally different than a large community bin. We all love to do things in community, but some things are better held accountable when we can go to a single person and say, hey, remember, this is what our goal is. And you have to do that. Otherwise you got to go.
Yeah. Community doesn't work if there isn't a personality to, or a personalness to it. Mm-hmm. Where if you have a community bucket and you don't know who's dumping what, then it's not really a community. It's just something you're all using. There's a subtle difference there, and I think that's because of the way we live. That doesn't necessarily translate, even if that's our intent.
Right.
That's something I experienced. I used to live in Italy, and they have like 15 different bins for different things, and one of them was compost. But you would see tons of garbage in everything, even though they use the small bins, because it's like there's one giant dumpster basically in every neighborhood. You don't know your neighbors. Like no, it's 2010 then, but nobody knows their neighbors in the modern era really. And without that accountability to one another, community is just like a buzzword.
Yeah,
true.
And our job is to share the story of the farm where it ends up. And when they get that vibe, people really do discipline themselves pretty darn well. And then with just, like I say, with a little bit of a personal accountability when the time comes, if that person has a repeated issue, it does end it at the start. That's the trick with this whole thing. Don't try to catch this stuff downstream as much as you put 90% of your effort should go at the start, the first interaction. So really clear information with images is ideal. Images of what can go in the pail, what shouldn't, like your dirty dozen things that shouldn't go in. These are ways that we can improve our contamination rate. But I will say that we consider a chicken bone contamination for our program. Whereas if you go to any industrial process, it's microplastics, it's pharmaceuticals, it's chemicals, it's radioactive material. It can be literally all the nastiest stuff that humans produce can be in some of that compost. So the fact that it's small pail pickups and that it's food waste centric and leaves and then wood chips from trusted tree services, that's how you control, God, I don't even know, well over 99% of what could be in there.
Yeah, I think about here personally, again, I guess use my own examples. The town I live in does a lot of like massive composting, and not too far away recently they found out that PCBs had ended up or PFAs rather, had ended up in the wastewater from a site that was processing composting, because again, they're going at such a scale that they can't really track effectively what's going through their streams. And, unfortunately, nasty stuff gets in there.
Yeah.
Now, with chicken bones, I'm surprised, even at the scale you guys are at, that you can't compost it. I'm assuming you don't want people to do it because then there'll be too much of it.
That's right.
I imagine that you guys could compost some of it.
Our program purposely avoids it, and it's just to keep it simple for our farm partners. So we don't have pests, we don't have the possibility of viruses or anything like that. Our process is super kind of like small batch, done with primarily hand tools. So we do have the ability to have a super effective, they call it PFRP, but a process to further reduce pathogens. So we're hitting 131 degrees for a couple of weeks and killing off anything that could hurt you. But the occasional chicken bone is not necessarily the issue. It's just a matter of kind of setting that standard at the start that program is built for the farm. So if these materials don't end up actually serving our purpose, then we're just going to keep them out and we're all going to play that game together.
Yeah, makes sense. So how does it work in terms of like, how do people like buy into this? And is it just I want to feel good about myself, so I'm contributing to this, or is there an actual benefit for people that are contributing their food waste?
Just to piggyback off of what Sean said earlier and you all were talking about, I love the fact that you included community as a buzzword, because it is a buzzword for people right now. It's something that is like cool. It's an aesthetic. And that's bullshit, to be quite frank with you. It's bullshit. This is like when you buy into, I'm just in that place right now in my life personally, where if I buy into something, I really want to make sure that it's beneficial to the world. It's not just beneficial to me. It's beneficial to what I want to be and what I want to continue growing into. And but when people buy into this, you're paying $25 to get a pail and put your food waste in this pail. You get to pick what size, depending on your household size. And you actually get an incentive to where you can actually get compost back for yourself to put on your plants or on your own garden, which is really cool. Like, I mean, the whole process of this thing is so amazing. It's really amazing to be a part of. And with marketing, we've passed out flyers to people, and people have this excitement. There's like a glow in their face when they see these flyers, and they're like, "Oh, this is a part of a farm. This is awesome." And I remember my first day when I flyered with Sean, I didn't know what to expect. I'm thinking that I'm going to be out there, trying to give somebody a flyer and they're like, fuck you. I don't know if I can curse. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can. You're good.
And these people were really, they were so excited to take this piece of paper that they were essentially ready to use and find more information about. So of course, every business is gonna have their pros and cons. Where there are some people who are for the aesthetic and they want to be able to post about what they're doing, right? And then you have those people who are really trying to grow into being a better person for themselves and the environment. And so they, have that sense of passion, and those are the people that essentially we want to be a part of Denver Compost Collective.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think all of this is underscored by politics for a number of reasons, right? When we're talking about reducing waste, when we're talking about closed loop systems, we're talking about how do we build community through basically, and I guess you might not think of food waste as being part of your food ways, but it really is. It reflects, that whole cycle, and in a way that I think people sometimes, we don't like to think about the waste we create and the way our lifestyle creates waste. And no one wants to think about the fact that the diaper they wore 30, 40 years ago is still sitting in a landfill somewhere. Like that's just, it's a reality, but we don't want to engage with it. Whereas I think this is taking that and flipping it into this, look at what we can create, even in something such as waste. So I don't know, Sean, if you could speak a little bit about maybe the politics and how that frames up what you're doing and underscores the work and where you'll continue to go with this project.
I am so glad we're on your podcast and talking about this. That's fantastic. It's kind of like the obvious thing to look at first if we're going to try to be effective, right? Is what's the power structure we're operating in? How are we influenced? And how are we reclaiming our ability to act? I think the reason some people, myself included, and I think our crew, we get involved in composting is because it's right there in our hands. Every day, it's right here. It's a relationship that somebody informed us is dealt with by putting it away in a linear system to pay some unknown agency to put it in a pile and create climate change and leachate and all the things that come from landfills. What we don't know commonly is that those people are on boards, the people who run those landfills, and often sustainability boards at a city, a county, at levels that are way past our range of influence, unfortunately. But they make policies that kind of cut our capacity to change anything. It's a profitable industry to throw things away. In Denver, we have a landfill that has 100 years of space, and they just want to load it up because every one of those trucks represents money. So is it likely to see a compost program take off that does what we all hope composting does? The answer is, to me, just no. Even the composting programs that are here, and the phrase "talk trash," it's like, hey, pun intended, but like the bigger you get and the more profit seeking your motive and the more disconnected from your community, there's just no checks on what ends up being in that finished compost or who got paid what along the way. And it's all behind a scene, it's a screen, or like a curtain. How to bring all that back home is well within our reach. Composting is not complicated. You can make it as complicated as you want with ASP systems, that's aerated static pile. That's an awesome way to do it. Or you can make it as kind of niche within a niche as you want with vermiculture, vermicomposting, and produce a super high value finished compost that you might use for who knows what, maybe cannabis in this area. But the point is that you can get into it and you can be responsible for that whole path of where that stuff goes, who got paid what's this product to be used for. And for us, the meaning that you can hear is that it's going to grow our food to our soils in our community to heal our toxic environment. And literally, in my case, I'm feeding my 2 babies this food. It really matters to me how it's done. So when that level of buy-in is just stacked upon stacked, it just, it resonates. It feels really good to be a part of. It feels like we can do more. And so that's actually why we wanted to be on your podcast. And I'm so glad you invited us, is just to let people know it's not that hard to get into. You can do it where you're at.
Yeah. The collective cooperative model, I think, like what you guys are doing, highlights what I think we should be. I think a lot of the audience that listens to this is, I would assume, pretty left-leaning. And I think a lot of the people listening are also aware of the shortfalls of homesteading, but still kind of fall into that trap of, I'm going to compost, I'm going to grow my vegetables, I'm going to have chickens, I'm going to individually do all of these things instead of thinking about that bigger picture of I don't need to do all of these things. I have a community and there are people that are more into composting. Like I compost, but I'm bad at it because it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's low on my list of things to do. And like
Producing.
I I'm not super like I appreciate it, I respect it, I think it's cool, but it's in terms of all the things I do, it's not a priority. So it would make a lot more sense for me to be able to say, hey, you care about this, you are much more informed about it.
Yeah.
So I should be handing it off to those people and I can focus on the things I care about.
And we solved the riddle of how do you get paid to be there, because when it's blowing snow or when it's 98 degrees like these folks had to go through just last week, it's you need to get paid. You need to be paid so that you can make it through your life and that you can prioritize this work and be excellent at it. And to do that while you're producing food and trying to make a farm function, I mean, Jimmy can tell you that multitasking that's for the birds. You end up not doing great at any of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's good to know those things because then you can see how the impacts that you make about, like your example of like people looking at a chicken bone, like, yeah, it does compost. So I'm just going to throw it in anyway. Mm-hmm. If you don't see how that impacts has that domino effect, you're not going to make conscious, smart decisions. So it's important to be aware of how you fit into that system, but not necessarily trying to do everything yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes down to the buzzword community. How do we recreate community in a way that is meaningful? And by creating that community, we can create these networks that we're talking about, these cooperatives, these collaboratives, where people can find what they're interested in and dedicate their time to it instead of, like I said, trying to do everything less efficiently, less good. And I think that's really difficult. And I'm hoping as people listen to this, their thought is, I like composting. How do I get into something like this? Like if you were to look at somebody who says, I listen to this podcast, I want to do something like this, how do I start? Like I'm not going to go buy a truck and start going to apartment buildings. Like what do I do?
Well, you could go buy a truck. You really could, and people do, and people have all across the country in different cities. But and I should say not even necessarily cities, with a lot of rural context too. But it depends on have you solved the riddle of how you get paid, and have you solved the riddle of all this has to go somewhere and it has to go somewhere quick. Like it needs to be in process fast before biology takes another turn. So it's a disciplined process that it's better to, in my opinion, start slow, be more patient at, but definitely find, I would say, partners that you can rely on, but also partners that can come and go as you evolve your process. So because not everybody, you get involved in a partnership and then they change their goals and now you don't have a business model. So a lot of people will want to partner up, say, with a local food bank. And maybe here's an idea: partner up with a local food bank and get a grant. You can get a grant for this and then produce your compost for community gardens. Solve the problem of not having too much material at one space by having a few community garden partnerships. But even that system, if that one partner that you had where your food is coming from stops functioning or changes their plans, now your business model fell apart. So I guess I just mean diversify your portfolio and then learn what works from a real world perspective. You can come in with a theory all you want, but what did Fred Hampton say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's theories. Yeah. I was listening to you talk about this, and I work with a local food pantry. And one of the interesting things is you would think like, okay, you work with a food pantry, they're going to have like a diversity of foods and you're going to get like a little bit of everything every week. And it's instead like 1 week there'll be 30 extra ducks. And it's like, okay, it's not what you think of like, oh, I'm going to get like a couple heads of lettuce and this and that every week. Some weeks you'll get like 3 boxes of eggplant. And the next week, like I said, you'll get a couple dozen ducks. And it's like, well, some of this I can use, some of this I can't use. Some of this will go in a freezer. Some of this will go in a free fridge. And then some of it will have to get thrown away, even despite all of your best efforts, because the system is just not really balanced to deal with all these different ebbs and flows of certain products.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it different when you look in a 1 gallon pail and you see coffee grounds, banana peels, eggshells, you see apple cores? That's potassium, calcium, nitrogen. It's all of what you want in your finished compost. So if you start with that end in mind, you're going to produce a fantastic product. but B, have it in a manageable situation for yourself. So you're not trying to chop pumpkins with an axe out back,
Yeah, that's what I have the sheep for. Just toss it to them. Thanks for tuning in to the Poor Proles Almanac. We've been exploring new areas of content, including new podcasts such as Tomorrow Today and the Gastropocene with yours truly, but also building a network with folks like Death and Friends. We're also building gardening resources and have a bunch of other content coming in the future. If you'd like to get more information or to sign up for our newsletter where we announce new projects, head over to poorproles.com and click on the Our Email List tab. The email list is only used for important, newsworthy content, and we won't clog your inbox, and you'll get less than 6 emails a year. That's poorproles.com at the Our Email List tab. So what has been the feedback from the Denver community? You've talked a little bit about marketing and like reaching out to people. Did you evolve your marketing style as you kept doing it, realizing you had to engage with your potential clients in a certain way? Or did you find that people are like, yes, this is something I've been looking for and I didn't know where to find it?
Yeah, you can speak it anyway.
Well, I can talk about the now.
Sure.
How'd you start?
I started really timid. Jimmy, you were there back then, where I just really, we started on bicycles for one thing. So we were tooling around Denver with 300 pounds of compost on a bike trailer.
Great quads.
Yeah. You should have seen them. I mean, you could open a bottle of beer on those quads, but until the knees give out, I'll tell you. But starting in that way, solving how to do composting right throughout the year, that's perfect. That's just great if you can sustain it, because low income and but low complexity. So and then building off that is how we did. But all the while, the thing that kept me up at night was, staying underneath the Colorado's solid waste regulations limit. And I'll just tell you what that is for Colorado. You're considered a composting facility if you have on your site of processing 100 cubic yards. So if for your audience, a cubic yard is the size of a washing machine, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. So 100 of those, 100 cubic yards of brown material is the maximum you can have at a site. And you're thinking, that sounds pretty good. I could do a lot of composting with that kind of volume. But it's 5 cubic yards of food waste on site or in process. That is a small amount when you're actually getting into it. I'll tell you, for us, that's like 3 weeks of our weekly pickup. Think of how many farm partners we have to have in order to have this cycle go. So constantly concerned about whether or not we're going to get the state interviewing us about what's going on and whether or not we need to shut down. That's just a thing that keeps you really trying to solve the problems, distribute the situation. It keeps you honestly disciplined. In a way, I'm glad we did it that way, because it forces us into more relationships. But from those relationships, I mean, you see some of our staff here, so it makes a real community answer if you have to solve it in that way. So I started super timid and I wasn't willing to shout it from the rooftops what we were doing. So our marketing reflected that. It was targeted flyering in areas where I knew we had concentrated apartment dwellers who were likely to be, I'm just going to say this, informed about what composting is and why you would pay for it. Because some people are like, why would I pay you to take my trash? And thankfully, in a city like Denver, I don't ever have to answer that question. People seek us out because they're like, oh, I know what you're doing and I want it. This is an answer. That's our audience. That's in business, you might say we're going to focus on 4% of a population to try to target our marketing. We're at like 0.4%. We really want the people who are really well informed, ready to sign up, and can keep the material clean coming in. And from there, it's just taking care of us to go that route.
And like we talked about the negative aspect of community being a buzzword, but this is definitely the positive aspect of community being a buzzword, because when you look at the word compost, it pretty much speaks for itself. But when you look at the flyers and you look and you see the person that's a part of it, that's giving you this flyer, I think a lot of people see it as, why not? There isn't much that I have to explain when I'm talking to someone. There isn't much that I have to, I really don't spend much time talking to people. They're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, like that's it. Some people ask me, what is it for? And I just, as soon as I say that, it goes to a farm, I mean, their eyes light up if they haven't already. So yeah, it's so awesome. And talking to people, when it comes to talking to people, Yeah, we're basically saying, explaining what this process is, or where this compost of your food waste is going back to the farms and go and growing vegetables so that you can have them. You can go into farmers markets and get peppers that taste way better, way better than the grocery store.
No.
And if you're wanting to do your own composting, because that's what all the cool kids are doing, you come down to our farm and we'll show you how to do it. We teach free classes and all that. So
that's awesome.
It's how to solve the issue of composting more than just go through us, because we're the gatekeepers and we are the experts and we're the only way that you could possibly participate in your local food system or anything. It's just, where do we want to meet? But here's how we get paid. And if you want the easy route, I don't blame you, because you got things to do. We'll take your food waste.
Yeah. You've been doing this now for a decade. Is there anything, looking back, you wish you had, design things differently, set up things differently? Anything, in retrospect, you'd say, hey, this seems like a good idea. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And then I want to pass it off to Jimmy, because he's been a farm partner. So the input he's offered us in shaping how we do what we do is essential. And he doesn't hold back. He's got to say. So what I'll say is, I'm so grateful that we've had to learn from what it means to be in a backyard setting, to a community garden setting, to a community farm setting, and then several community farms, to answer the question of how do you make this work at a specific site with this crew and with the equipment that happens to be here on site. A lot of people think that, to be on this scale, you need to have heavy equipment. We don't have any heavy equipment. We have a truck that picks up the food waste.
Pails are heavy.
Jimmy,
that's heavy equipment. Let me tell you, your shoulders.
So are your biceps, man.
That's that shoulder.
There's your heavy equipment.
Yeah.
But but we are partnering up with more farm partners that happen to have a tractor on site, because they already have that equipment for their field. So the maintaining of that pile can take on a different shape depending on where we're at. Or do they have electric? If they have electric, we'll set up an aerated static pile for a super controlled process. And by the way, also, anybody who's looking to get in on even a scale, like say you have a horse on your property, or in your case, you have sheep, ASP is a really good answer. It doesn't take much know-how. You can just kind of YouTube some videos, or you can ask us and we'll share what we've got. It's a great way to control flies, odors. It keeps volatile organic compounds from escaping into the atmosphere as greenhouse gas. It's a brilliant answer for how you kind of do all the things right if you have enough material.
And you won't have to flip it.
That's right.
And you're saying ASP?
ASP, aerated static pile. It was a method kind of set up for horse properties in Maine. This was like in the 80s, 70s, and it never really took off with big industrial producers because they were so committed to the windrow system where you turn it so regular.
Yeah.
ASP composting, for anybody who has any kind of, let's just say you're producing, 40 yards a year, even something of that quantity. ASP is a great way to go.
So are you guys just doing traditional hot composting, basically?
Yeah. So we still use a windrow method, and especially on sites where we can rely on a farmer's tractor to turn it, because that's the heavy labor part of it. But when you do an ASP system, which was with our last farm partner, as Kira was saying, you just build the pile, you build it right at the start, you cover that thing up, and it's just cooking for 4 months. You don't need to do anything beyond that. The awesome. ASP is a blower motor that sends air into pipes that you put under the pile, and it just kind of burps out air every 30 minutes for 30 seconds.
So that's kind of like the Johnson Sioux? Is it? It's
similar, except for it's powered by a blower motor, like similar to what you would use for a bouncy castle if you were going to have a kids castle. Yeah, and you just put it on
cool.
the timer. Yeah, so it's a more, we'll say, industrial way to do the Johnson Sioux method, and it's going to be producing heat. So our goal has to be balanced. We want the highest quality compost possible, but we also need to process it pretty quick in order to keep under the regulations for what we can have at a given site for active compost. That was a big mouthful, but it's to say that for our sites, it worked.
Yeah.
And it's a good method for that scale because they're actually trying to crank out 100 cubic yards for their site. So the more effective we can crank through material and then let fungal dominant, situations take over after, the better.
Yeah. Have you guys played at all with like bokashi or anything like that? Or you're just sticking to what you know?
Thankfully, we since we limit the meat at the start, we're just going on that train.
Cool.
We haven't even messed around with meat, bones, dairy, the kind of things that you would want to use bokashi for. We are getting into vermicomposting. And in order to do that, we're getting into vermiculture at our shop, as in producing and breeding worm population. But that's going to be an awesome new project to get into in the spring.
Yeah,
but
farms are cool.
Just pass it over to Jimmy, because as the farm partner, we were just touring his farm. We're here at his place now. He showed us, our crew here, the newer folk, to the old processing site, and we just got to get really honest about what worked and what didn't. And so that's the feedback that shapes how we do what we do. But Jimmy, you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So it's as some of your listeners can imagine, if you have 500 gallons of rotting food waste every single week that you have to process,
Don't hold back, Jimmy,
or else you're gonna have a giant mess. It was really important, to dial in the process of how we build the pile so that it cooks, because it could easily become a more of a liability than an asset if we don't do it right. We have learned over the course of time, from starting out with just, bags of leaves that we collected in the fall with coffee grounds from coffee shops, to, kind of incrementally getting more and more compost that's like, whoa, okay, we have to figure this out. And, it also varies with the different farms and, the farm's proximity to other neighbors and needing to be accountable to other neighbors, both in terms of, any mitigating any potential smells, mitigating any potential like unsightliness, that comes along with this. I mean, we, have a really neat way to ensure that our piles get cooked all the way by, we build these piles, and then, we take old compost that's already kind of finished, and then we cover the new pile up with it. So it kind of looks really good, and then it cooks really well. And it just, when we cover it, the new pile with about, 6 inches to a foot of old compost that's finished, it really heats up really well. And just to give a sense of like the volume, I mean, we make these windrows that are, about 25 feet long, about 10 feet wide, and about like 6-7 feet tall, and we do that with freaking pitchforks and wheelbarrows, and then it heats up rapidly. And that is just what we have to do to just ensure that it cooks, and it's just done. Okay, move on to the next week, and it's just like dialing in our process has just been so instrumental to just making sure that, we are hitting these, food safety thresholds. We're being accountable to the farm itself. We're being accountable to the neighbors, and just trying to figure out like, holy crap, how do we make this work? I mean, then once things are finished, we have to sift the stuff. We make our compost piles with wood chips that we get dropped off from tree companies, with leaves that we collect. And we can just kind of like scoop it and cover a field and till it in as is. But, there's another aspect to this of sifting it.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother arena of work that needs to be done. And so it's just like, we're really trying to, improve our process on how to streamline this, like how to truly be an asset for the farms. Because if we don't do it right, it's a mess. And it's just like, it's so much physical work. So, it's just really trying to orchestrate this thing. And, it's difficult, but it's not too difficult. So, I don't want to give the listeners the impression that's like, this is beyond what's possible. We just learn a little bit every year. It's just like gardening or farming. You just do it, and you learn what you learn, and, you have next year to get a little bit better at it, And so it's just been this, iterative process of figuring out what works. And
for your listeners too, like given the climate that you're in, or the social context, or where the resources are coming from, or who your farm partner is, all those things start to shape your processes more and more. It's kind of wild to go in to a situation thinking you have a good theory, a good model figured out, and then to realize, oops, I'm actually inconveniencing these folks who are trying to grow us food. Like we have to solve that. So being forced to have these relationships matter is, again, that's the actual, community, as opposed to the buzzword when it's mutual aid and it's also mutual destruction. You better get it right.
Yeah. So is there anything in particular that stood out as something you thought would work or would be like, I don't want to say common sense, but one of the things I feel like I'm always talking about is like you see something on YouTube, but then you go and do it and it never works the way they did it on YouTube. Are there any of those types of things that you've experienced now having scaled up?
Innumerable. One of them right there with Jimmy was that we collected 1,500 bags of leaves 1 year, and thought that we did the math right, and that was way more than we needed for that particular year. And they sat in black plastic bags. Well, the sun will degrade those black plastic bags, and pretty soon you've got microplastics that you're offering to your environment, and that just takes tackling leaves that are full of spiders and full of mess and getting super nasty to get that plastic out of there. So it's just one of those things where as soon as you start working in volume, the bump on effects of going from paper bags to plastic bags from our collection area, it just, wow, that changed everything. One little thing and oh boy, now we're in volumes.
Mm-hmm. But it is, yeah, that was kind of a disaster to get so many, like 5 years worth of leaves for, just about 6 months worth of composting. It's like, oh God, gotta, remember to check the math next time. But anyways, that part of it, the collecting the leaves, I mean, we get paid to people pay us $1 a bag for the leaves. And so we've also orchestrated this system with different neighborhood organizations that will take the time to organize people in a particular neighborhood to put their leaves out for us. And sometimes there's been years where we just kind of go up and down alleys, but at this point, people put their leaves out for us, pay us. It's pretty convenient. So it's another way that we make it's an instrumental way to make this whole process work. But yeah, we got to get the numbers right with how many bags we do collect, because oh my God, it could be a lot.
And if our company is putting a situation out there where Jimmy's got to be with a pitchfork turning yards and yards of compost, hot compost, it's like the man better be paid well, And so again, with getting paid for your pickups, I think is just essential. And when you have apartment dwellers versus say a household that might have 30 gallons of material, our average pickup is a gallon. And that person is paying us $6 a week. Now we live in Denver, so the cost of living is huge here, but $6 a week can go a long way in paying our workers and in improving our processes and fixing some of these bumps along the road. And when you have an informed, let's say, clientele, we call them members, they're customers, but it's like they're a part of a process. When you have people who are informed about the environmental good that they're doing, but also the social good, and that we insist on a living wage and these kinds of things is what you're paying for, it makes it easy for them to let that money go. And then of course we have anybody who can't afford it. It's like, do you want 50% off? I mean, we even have some people paying $1 a month, because if it's a financial hardship situation, we'll totally go there. But when people come to us and they say, can we get a group discount? Can we get our whole building signed up? Everybody's going to pay $6 a week, because if you can afford it, we need it.
Is there anything you guys that I haven't asked you that you guys think people should know about in terms of what you guys are doing, or what maybe other organizations that are doing similar work, what they should know about that?
Well, you didn't ask if it's smelly. And yes, it is very smelly sometimes.
Drive with the windows down.
Yeah, I like to say food waste stinks. Compost doesn't. Right. So if it's in process properly, you should have a pretty earthy, if not musty odor, but certainly not a bad odor. Not the kind of thing that's going to get you having the state called on you or anything like that. That answer comes from what you would do in your backyard. It's the same problem that they have when they produce at this 400-acre site outside of Denver with the biggest equipment ever. It's the same issue. If you didn't get your pile recipe built right and your maintenance right, you're going to produce odor. So it's the same biology at play, though. If you can do a backyard pile, you can do a community garden pile. If you can do a community garden pile, you can do a community farm pile, and so on down the line. So if you are willing to go through that process of hands-on learning as opposed to just what you heard out of a book or a YouTube video, I think you're going to be just as capable at it as we are.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'll add to that. I think it's not quite intuitive for a lot of folks to understand that an entire third of the labor, more than that even, goes to cleaning out these compost pails every single week. Our program is when people sign up, we give them an empty pail, like a gallon, 2 gallons, whatever it happens to be. and then they fill it up over the course of a week. And then we come and pick it up and then replace that full pail with an empty one. And the process of cleaning those pails is enormous. Mm-hmm. And it is so much work to get this right and get somebody returned a clean pail that, smells good and is just
doesn't have week old egg yolk or something.
Yeah. So it's just I think that it's hard. Yeah. So I think people really got to understand who are getting into this, that, there is this huge part of it of cleaning out these pails, cleaning out these buckets.
I will say when you do get your bucket, it's odorless. Like these buckets you can have it in your place and it can be full, it could be moldy, it could stink, but you won't smell it until you open that thing. And then you bum rush yourself with your own stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So
the pail you select is a big deal. We can share what kind of pail we use, but it's a UN rated pail that's made for disaster sites when they're distributing food. Not really intended for wet food as much, but still it functions for our purpose, and we buy it in bulk, so we get a fairly good rate on it. But it's a sealing pail that screws down and actually has a locking lid. And there's the real the balance of how this program has to stay contained, right? It has to stay clean, right? But it also has to convince, say, an apartment manager that we're not going to be setting out nasty bags of gooey mess on your front steps of your building. It's a contained program, and the pail is a huge part of why it works. So I highly recommend people solve that problem too. And if you want, you can take our pail. I mean, I'll send you one.
Sean, for folks that have enjoyed this, are not scared away yet, and want to do some cool stuff, or they just want to start getting their compost picked up by you, where can I send them?
Sure. Send them to our website. They can learn all about it, and it's really easy to sign up. It's Denver Compost Collective. That's with an IVE.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all of your time. I know you guys are busy. You're at the farm now. Hopefully it doesn't smell too much there. It means you guys are doing something right.
Right.
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been really interesting.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.